this was definitely my best performance of 2023. Now you're joining me at Hallcroft Fisheries today, and I'm going to do something a little bit different, a bit of a voiceover over a live match. Now, this was a Feeder Masters winter pairs, and I was standing in for none other than the Feeder Master himself, well, Feeder King, Feeder Master, Lee Kerry. No pressure, absolutely no pressure. He fishes this pairs event with his partner, Will Freeman. And it's a brilliant event, and it's one that I fished before. I fished it with Rob Wotton. We come second by a few ounces a couple of years ago. I fished it the following year and had a bit of a disaster, and I've just not really got back into it since. But when Lee said, would you mind standing in for me, I thought, do you know what, why not? Anyway, I drew on Croft. In the corner, I think, from memory, it's like peg 20 or something like that. I can't even remember, because as you can see, they had some like unbelievable flooding in that sort of area, and as you can see, my peg got absolutely washed away. It's absolutely full of gravel that's been dumped there from the floods. The river had burst its banks, filled all the lakes up, and it was amazing that this match actually went ahead. Anyway, I drew this peg on Croft, and I rang Lee up just to sort of get a bit of a lowdown, really, to see what he thought about the job, what I was to expect. And he'd actually been for a practice in the week and sort of gave me some really good advice. The water was really clear, which is unusual obviously for a commercial venue, but obviously with the flooding, it sort of flushed the water through, and it probably killed any sort of algae and stuff that was in the lake. And it was just a bit, it just looked a bit, I don't know, you get a feel, don't you, sometimes that a venue is going to be really difficult, and in practice people have been fishing it and it had been really difficult. So I wasn't expecting a lot, and I didn't actually expect much from this peg. However, a few people sort of said that this peg actually has a bit of form for small fish. So I was thought, well, if I can catch 8 to sort of 10 pound of small fish, then I'll have done all right, because 20 pound is normally your target at Hallcroft on these feeder matches. 20 pound between the pair, that is. And then if you get a bit more, it's brilliant. But 20 pound normally gets you onto a good sort of standing, really. Anyway, I looked at my peg and I thought, just to my right at about 20 metres, there was a little post in the water where an old aerator used to be. As you can see, I sort of set off by feeding a line at 12 metres, one down the left and right hand edge. I'd also thought about fishing 5 metres in front of me, but I was going to feed that later in the day. But I wanted to start out towards this sort of old aerator. The lake was flat calm, as you can see, and I'd seen an odd little pinprick bubble coming up, and I thought, do you know what, that could be some fish, that. And with it being so hard, I thought it's not going to hurt to just chuck a single feeder over the top of them and just see if there's any skimmers held up. There might be a few carp. Can't count for a pound in this league, so they're well worth having, even though they're obviously a bit of a chew to get in on light tackle, because we're fishing like really light. I'll talk about a tackle again in a minute, but because it's a bit of a chew, trying to get them in, you kind of avoid them really. But if one came along, bearing in mind my target weight's sort of 8 to 10 pound, I thought, well, could be a good early start. Anyway, so I didn't even feed it. I just put a little ground bait feeder on, went out there, and as you can see, second chuck, I got a bite. Now, it was only a small fish, but as I said, I was expecting this match to be really hard. So getting off to a quick start, getting a bite, just sort of settled any sort of nerves, any sort of, I was thinking could be a while here without a bite, but to get a bite straight away was pretty cool. Now I decided to just plod on with this. That's, like I said, I put 2 feederfuls at sort of 12 metres, just ground bait, a little bit of joker and a few pinkies, and then down the edge I put a bit of ground bait and joker again, a few casters. But out there I was just literally putting in a tiny pinch of joker, and I just had a single maggot on the hook. I've got bloodworm on my side tray as well, because that is allowed in this league, but I kind of felt like a maggot in such clear waters would be a nice visual bait that they'd hopefully see as the feeder sort of hit the water and drop down. As you see, I'm casting pretty regular. That's a lot of your bites on this venue come really quickly, and by that I mean 1 to sort of 2 minutes. It's not uncommon to get bites after 30 seconds, but sort of 1 to 2 minutes. So it's almost pointless leaving your feeder out too long, especially on this lake. I think a lot of it is down to the fact that it's quite a silty lake bed, and I think your feeder and your hook bait and stuff goes missing a lot, and I think the fish are actually naturally sitting off the bottom, and every time you cast in, a little pop of your feeder sort of pulls a fish down, and it gives you enough to get a bite. That's my theory on it anyway, and I think regular casting with a small feeder is really important. At this point now, I'm just trying to assess what's going on. I'm looking around the lake and nobody's catching anything. So it's obvious that people, you know, just sort of working their pegs out on the day, seeing what's happening, but there's no skimmers really feeding. And I'm just thinking, well, I've got a perch in the net, probably just sort of sit and wait and fish this for the first hour and just see what happens, see what sort of this line gives me. I've not really committed any bait to it. I've just chucked out to where I think I've seen a few little pinprick bubbles, which could be a giveaway. I'm just seeing what it gives me. And as you can see, after 2 or 3 chucks, I actually hook what is a first skimmer. As you can see, we're playing the fish really gently. Like I said, everyone's like the crown jewels on this league. Really are important fish. And as you can see, I'm just trying to play it really gently, just sort of nice soft drag. But sometimes you can play them too soft, and as you can see, it hasn't come off. And I couldn't believe it, I was gutted. I was there thinking, oh my god, that's going to cost me, you know. That could have been a £2 fish, which I did see it flanking the water, and it was definitely over £1. And like £2 towards me, £8 target, come off at the net. What a disaster. But it was a good sign, the fact that I'd hooked a skimmer so early, using a bit of gut instinct, looking at where I think I'd seen some fish, and as you can see, tip's gone round again. It was obviously a good move. It was a bit of ingenuity really, just to sort of look around. It was blessed with that calm water, and it's something you can take into a lot of your fishing, whether it's carp, F1s, whatever. You know, they often give themselves away a little bit, especially on flat calm days. It was only a small fish that time, but there's obviously a gang of fish out there. You know, sometimes it could be reed bed, it could be an aerator, it could be something. There'll be something that gives them away where they are. A carp head and shouldering in the lake, whatever it is. This time of year, location's everything. And especially early in the match when the fish haven't decided to feed, sometimes you've got to go to them. And it's no different to if I was probably fishing a normal open match, I'd chuck a bomb and corn or something out there trying to catch a carp. It's no different to skimmers. They're naturally held up just the same as carp are. So it's well worth doing sometimes, especially when you don't know what a day is going to be like. It could be rubbish. And I was expecting this day to be really hard. So spending an hour just casting a little tiny feed around, not committing any bait to anywhere really, just literally a pinch of joker, a little bit of F1 dark in the feeder, and that was it. As you see, I'm getting bites, and it was I just felt like I'd made a really good decision there early doors. Granted, that first skimmer came off, but when you're looking around the lake and no one's getting a bite, really good. Now I just want to talk about the importance of the tackle that we're using on this sort of fishing, because it is delicate fishing. We're using 16, 18 hooks, fine wire hooks. I was using an F1 pellet in this instance, a Guru F1 pellet, which is a lovely sort of sharp, fine hook. A lot of the guys use F1 maggots, B911 F1s, that kind of thing. So you've got to match that, and you're fishing 010, 012 at the absolute most, hook length wise, on a rod. So you've got to match that with suitably balanced tackle. So for this longer line, I used a 10-foot Preston Superior SL, which is a lovely soft rod, 1/2 ounce quiver tip. And then for the short 5 metre and margin line, I used an really old 9-foot Mini F1, which is a classic rod actually, and I absolutely love that rod. When you don't need to cast far and you just want to make sure you don't bump anything, that sort of rod is really, really good. Again, matched it with suitably sized reels. I used magnitude reels, which I think are really good. And then we're actually loaded with a new line we've got coming out, which there'll be more details on very soon. But it's a low stretch mono, so it helps you see bites on these days where, because braid's not allowed on this venue, so having a nice low stretch mono, obviously it helps accentuate the bites, especially when you're fishing for these smaller fish. Again, feeder choice, very much a personal thing. I was using a tiny smooth hound, the smallest smooth hound on this line, just because I like a cage feeder. it just offered enough bait to get me a bite without filling them up, but I'd have no hesitation in dropping it down to like a little wire cage, a maggot feeder, a little window. Just play around with it, have a few different feeders at your disposal, because it can really work. Chopping and changing for your feeders can get you bites. Now what happened here actually was quite interesting. I caught that skimmer early, lost that one, but as the match was going on, obviously I've chopped out a few bits here, but as the match was going on, it was obvious that the little roaches started feeding. And everywhere, every bite, I was just chucking it in, and it was pretty much going round straight away with a tiny roach. Now, with it being so difficult, like I say, with an 8 pound sort of target weight, I thought, yeah, just catch them. Bites is good, and it sort of generates activity. It gets your feeder plopping in regularly, which I think is pulling the fish. So yeah, I was more than happy to just catch them. I wasn't like thinking put a bigger bait on to get through them or anything like that. I just thought just keep fishing single maggot. I even tried like 2 bloodworm, which was good, but to be honest, a maggot was as good as anything, or 2 pinkies. And I just thought, you know, just get your head down and catch these little fish. It's important to note that we've got to use running rigs on this sort of fishing, and I use a tiny little, like a bead setup. It's the rig that Mick actually explained on his the Nufish YouTube channel, and it's really nice. It's just a nice little free running, tangle free setup. There's a tiny bead in the setup to stop your feeder running over your hook length. It's 50cm hook length rule. I actually like to, when I'm fishing like this, I actually like to use a little touch longer, like 60cm, just in my head. Gives me a chance to catch the fish's eye on the way down. Just a little confidence thing I've got. But yeah, it's a free running setup. I think a feeder link's really important. I make my own out of like a little tiny piece of braid. I think it just, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I do a lot of chub fishing, and I use a link on that. I think when you're trying to get a fish to take a bait with a hook, not a hair rig, I think it's so important to have a feeder link on, because you're just giving them that little bit of extra time, a little bit less resistance, and I think it just helps more positive bites. And that the same can be said for how I'm setting my quiver tip. I'm lucky on this match because there's no toe, but I'm just chucking it out, and I'm trying to keep my tip as straight as possible with still a tiny bit of tension in my line, so as soon as a fish picks up the bait, I know about it. Most of the first hour was spent on this line. I was getting plenty of bites. A lot of them were small fish. I'd had that bonus skimmer, odd roach, odd perch, but I was happy. I'm catching fish, which is all you can ask for. Like I said earlier, and I was very much expecting this to be a tough old day, and the fact that I was catching fish when nobody else was, I thought, do you know what, this is alright, and I could probably do this all day and catch 8 pounds, to be fair. Like they're just nice little dumpy fish, an odd little dumpy perch, odd little chunky roach. You know, you're catching 1 to 3 ounce fish regular. So it was just a case of getting in the groove and trying to make the most of it, really. I'd sort of fed that 12 metre line thinking for the second half of the day, really. I'd got the margin lines, but I sort of felt that needed a bit of time as well. I was hoping to catch maybe a few perch, maybe a few roach down there, because I'm sort of in a corner on this peg. And although there was no cover in the water, by that I mean bushes or reeds or anything, there was some overhanging trees, and I think when it's clear and hard like it is on this day, any sort of bankside cover can really help. And I was hoping that area, that sort of corner, would hold some fish. But like I say, I couldn't really come off this at the moment, because there was just bites to be had. You'll notice how gently I play the fish, and it's so important this. When you're fishing with small hooks, and even with the softest rods like we're using here, the SLs and the mini F1s, they still feel quite stiff when you're catching these small fish. And you've got to just have your drag set loose and just play them as gently as possible, because every fish has got to go in the net. Now, as you can see, I thought it's time to have a little look in the edge. It was that foul line. It was all right. It was okay, but I wasn't going anywhere fast. So I thought, do you know what? It's worth just having a quick look down this edge, because the last thing you want to do is leave perch for too long. If you leave perch over some bait for too long, there's every chance they could sort of fill themselves up. They could gorge themselves on the bait you've put in. And although I'd only put a bit of ground bait and a few casts and a little bit of joker, I still wanted to catch them before they filled up. And if I could quick nip in, I think this was from memory about after the hour mark. If I could just nip in, you might catch some perch quickly, and it's often the case, that is. As you can see, we're getting bites straight away. Again, there was a lot of these small roach about, but this looks like the first one on the target fish, perch. I've been told by Lee that they were like chunky fish, up to sort of 8 ounce at times, maybe even an odd bigger one. But yeah, on a tough day, I thought, you know what, they're all right. We'll catch plenty of them if we can. As you can see, it was a bit of an awkward cast because of the tree right to my left, so it was like a little bit of an underarm side lob kind of setup. Again, I was just swapping through my feeders, really, putting a little bit of ground bait in every now and again, putting a maggot feeder on every now and again, putting a smooth hound on even at times, just really working through it. And even fishing an empty feeder was quite good at times. And there was a lot of fish down there, like roach, and it was noticeable that when the perch were in the swim, we wouldn't catch any roach, and likewise when the perch had backed off, I'd catch a roach or chuck. Like, almost couldn't get my bait to the bottom. So really interesting how your swim goes in cycles. And this is one of those moments where obviously the roach are in the peg because the perch backed off a little bit. I was actually joined on this day. Alan Norrish, who's a fellow YouTuber. Hello, Alan. He was next to me, and he was having a bit of a tough old day at this point. He wasn't blessed to have this corner, and he was catching an odd skimmer, but finding it hard. It was good to have a bit of someone to chat to. I like to have a chat when I'm fishing. Bit of a nightmare for it. Luckily, the perch came back. And these fish fight so hard, even though, you know, they're only 8 ounce sort of fish. They fight so hard, you really know you've got them on, especially with light tackle. And I think having a fine, sharp hook is so important for these fish. They've got such bony mouths. I think you do have to play them a little bit firmer than you would skimmers, because if you give them any slack, they just fall off. So we don't want that. We don't want them to fall off. And I actually tried an F1 maggot hook, which I actually lost 2 or 3 fish on the bounce, and it's just a confidence thing sometimes, isn't it? And that F1 pellet has done me so proud when I used to fish this league back 4 or 5 years ago, that I had to take it off and put the F1 pellet back on. It's just a confidence thing, and to be fair, I never look back once I've done that. Right, so we had a really good spell there of roach fishing. As you can see, I did put a bit of a time lapse in there. Really good spell of roach fishing. The perch sort of backed off, but I just thought, you know what, I'm catching these roach so quickly at 5 metres, then they're well worth having. Just keep getting the bites. However, it sort of faded a bit, and I felt I needed to top it up, so I topped it up with a bit more ground bait and a few maggots and stuff. Then I went onto this 12 metre line for the first chuck, and as you can see, a tiny little skimmer. Now this was, apart from that first skimmer I caught, that was the only other skimmer I'd caught at this point, a tiny little one. And this lake used to be full of them, little tiny ones. But they obviously weren't feeding, or they're not there at the moment. Anyway, so back out onto the actual long line this time, where we started. And this was a funny part of the match. It was all about managing the swim. I think this is something that's often probably glossed over a little bit when you're doing videos and stuff, the actual swim management side of things. It's all well and good bagging up and clattering them and all that, but sometimes days aren't like that, and this day wasn't like that. Like, even though I'm getting plenty of bites, I couldn't absolutely dredge a line, if you know what I mean. I couldn't just keep ploughing it because bites would dry up, so I had to have other places to go to keep the bites going. I tried that right hand margin, which I'd also fed, no bites on that. So my key lines at the moment were the sort of left hand margin, 12 metres, and that sort of original line to the post, and just trying to skip between those three spots really, before hopefully having a strong finish at 5 metres in front of me late on, because that can be a great line on this lake. But swim management is so important, and I can't stress it enough. And even though it looks like I'm skipping around a little bit, luckily see I'm back on that sort of 12 metre line now. I'm actually just using the free lines just to bounce around. I'm catching most of my weight, that's the important thing, I'm catching most of my weight down the left hand margin. A better perch, we're down that left hand margin, they were the weight builders. But you can't just keep catching 8-ounce perch, otherwise there just isn't enough of them. So I had to have other areas to go. And having these other two spots allowed me to rest that left hand margin whilst keeping the keep net ticking over. So I'm feeding the keep net all the time with 1 to 3 ounces, whilst allowing them perch to sort of gather. And it was so important. It was really enjoyable fishing. Like, you're really thinking about it, thinking about your next move. I'm never settling on a line, if you notice. I'm just sort of trying to keep bites coming and ticking over. That sort of 12 metre line, out of interest, was full of roach. Really small roach actually, like 1 to 2 ounces. So another flurry of roach on that sort of 12 metre line, and it was just a case of, like I say, just really rotating, taking what come, just catching those sort of, just keeping feeding the net. It was so important. And like I say, single maggot, it was a really good upbait on the day. Tried bloodworm, but I never felt like, the problem with the bloodworm, the roach was so small that I felt like the bait was getting damaged too easily, and I was not giving myself the best chance of coming back with a fish. A single maggot was really effective, and I dropped it back in after a little flurry on that longer line, back in the edge. As you can see, it worked a treat. I'd refed it and I'd just left it, and perch sometimes need time to regather, and it obviously worked because this is my first trip back on that margin line, and we've hooked a proper fish. And like I say, they fight really hard, even though they're just perch, but they fight really well. Especially when you just, because it's a weight league, it's not done on points, this is a cumulative weight over I think it's 5 rounds. So you've got, every fish has got a count, and it's often super close. Apart from when Steve Ringer and Frankie Giannicelli run away with it every year, it's super close on the whole. So it's important to make sure you get every fish like that, you know, approaching sort of the pound mark, nice perch, got to get them in. As you see, just flicking it under that tree. It was an empty feeder was really good on this day. Just seemed to work, and I think that's probably due to the clear water, to be fair. Again, the roach back in, but it was good fishing, like really nice fishing. Great bites as well. When you're fishing so close with that line that's got minimal stretch in it, absolute winner. You know, you just get these lovely little pull rounds from the perch and the roach. It's unmissable, really. yeah, and as you can see, the carp were becoming a little bit of an issue. You know, and when you're trying to land fish on 010, 012, it's difficult when you've got a clip at 5 meters. So as soon as they run off, they obviously break you. But it's a bit frustrating because they definitely put the perch and stuff off. But as you can see, it didn't take long to get back into them. And I think this was a beautiful roach. Like getting up towards a pound, this roach was. Lovely roach in the sun, bit of sun, rare treat this winter. A lovely fish. I'd love to catch a load of them. There must be loads in there, but obviously quite rare fish. I think you don't seem to catch loads of them. But the fishing, I had a really good little spell once. I think that carp that I hooked and lost actually was upsetting the fish a little bit because I got him out of the swim. I had like a little bit of a golden spell, and now I caught that big roach. I caught some nice perch. And I put some proper weight in my net in no time at all, because every fish I was catching was 8 ounce and above, and it was just like a proper little golden flurry of action where I couldn't really put a foot wrong, to be fair. Very nice to be able to be in that situation. It was just really good fishing. But I guess this is, you know, don't mind patting myself on the back a little bit. You know, obviously I'm rotating my lines, I'm working hard. I've made a few what I felt were good decisions, feeding and switching swims and stuff like that. So this is kind of the fruits of your labour, isn't it, really, when it comes good like this. It's nice as a match angler to feel like the decisions you're making are actually paying off. Again, I had this sort of golden spell, and we're coming into that last 2 hours now where I'm sort of thinking I need to think about feeding my 5 metre line too, because I could catch another 5 or 6 pound on that as well, because I'm doing well here. So it's time to kick on. It's time to think, well, in the back of my mind I was actually thinking I could win the match here because I'm catching enough fish. I know how difficult it could potentially be. So I thought, do you know what, it's time to not go for broke, but try to make the most of my match plan here. So we put in, I think I put in 3 feeders, just ground bait again. Few casters, very few casters, and a tiny bit of joker, barely any joker really. I wanted it to eat casters and stuff. Again with rotating lines. But I've got that trap set now at 5 metres, which I felt might end up being an important line. If I could catch one proper skimmer on that, that's the hope. One proper skimmer, maybe a perch or 2, then that'd be good. And it can happen really late as well at this venue. Like I'm talking the last 15 minutes, it could be when you get your bite short. So there's no point feeding it really at the start, because you're not even looking at it until the last sort of 40-45 minutes anyway, so it's almost pointless. And you've got to approach this as a bit like a commercial, like you would in the summer, not feed a line until late. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here with that 5 metre. So we're going, and it's going really well at this point. Like I say, I'm really thinking about perhaps going for the match win here. It's going really well. I'm just rotating my lines, trying my best just to keep the bites coming. There's big perch really, really up for it on this day. Conditions must have been perfect for them. I'm catching them really regular, to be fair, and whenever, as long as them carp kept away, it was just nice. I just kept catching them. Like I say, single maggot. I experimented with putting a caster on as well. That was sometimes worth putting on. I tell you what caster did actually do, in fairness, it was not as attractive to those small roach, and it meant I could sit sometimes for perch a little bit longer. So that was well worth putting on, a single caster. Never tried worms or anything like that, but it was just a single maggot or a single caster. Seemed really good. And it was just a case of, like I say, just keep going. just keep putting them fish in the net. I'm looking around, I can see Mick Viles on, I think it's peg 1 where he drew. He's catching, I could see him catching perch, but he'd had a slow start. Dave Berry opposite was catching a few skimmers. I could see Matt Godfrey catching skimmers. I felt like he was a big threat. I think he was on peg 24 or 26, I seem to remember. And Alan to my right, he was starting to catch an odd bigger fish short as well, so I thought it was time for me to try short as well. I put that bait in, and it's time now to try short, because like I said earlier, with just 40 minutes to go or whatever, this is where you could catch, on some days when it's been really hard, you could double your weight quite easily short. As you see, I got a bite straight away. Only a small fish, but it showed signs of life, and sometimes you chuck in, you don't get any signs of life, but it did. Put a maggot on just to start with, but I felt like I could put on a bigger bait and probably be a bit more patient on this line. You know, I'm looking to fish for better fish on this line. I don't really want to be catching any tiny roach or anything like that. If I can help it, I can catch them quite quickly to my left. So here we go. A carp, unbelievable. Like I say, you're fishing at 5 metres and you've got just that small amount of line out. 0.10 hook length, it's amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, you do lose a few, but it's amazing you get them in, and thanks to that soft rod, that 9-foot F1, mini F1, just a beautiful rod for that sort of fishing. Just shows you what you can land. You know, you've got to take your time, obviously. We've got balanced tackle on, but granted, it's not what you'd use to target these sort of brutes. Being cautious, you know, I took the clip off straight away because I thought I've got to try and give myself the best chance, but I actually put it on straight away again. I put the clip straight back on again so I didn't lose my mark, because it felt like this fish was a bit of a plodder. Just sort of more than happy to just do its thing close in, which is unusual. Obviously sometimes you hook these carp and they charge off for the middle, but actually having this one that just wanted to plod around was most welcome. Like I say, they only count for £1, but £1's a pound, isn't it? I won't knock off a pound skimmer, so look at that lovely big common it was. Absolutely massive fish, like well into double figures. Amazing you can land them on 5 metres of line and a tiny hook and 0.10 hook length. It's amazing what you can land, really. And it's just a beautiful fish in Hallcroft. There's some real big fish, and you know, in these feeder matches you do hook a few. Not so many, a couple of max, but it's lovely to see him. And he was certainly a very healthy one. But with him being sort of in my peg, felt like it was probably worth attacking it again, putting 2 more feeder fulls in. Felt like he must have cleared out a bit of my bait, or upset the bait, or whatever. So it was well worth just topping it back up again and getting in the edge again. But the edge actually had slowed up at this point, so I felt like, do you know what, it's time to gamble and try and make this short line work. The left hand edge, I probably had most of the perch out of it. Now it sounds like a bold thing to say, but with perch you tend to catch them, don't you? You know when they're fading, and I think that sort of caught most of them that were there under that bush, so I felt quite comfortable just coming off it and going on that short line. Again, I'd put on like double maggot, 3 pinkies, a bunch of bloodworm, just something quite selective for this. I wanted to try and catch a better fish if I could help it. Obviously caught that carp, and we were sort of fishing now for proper fish. And it's important to sit on your hands, because you're fishing so close to you, you get a lot of indications. And it's got a lovely soft tip on with, and I've got a bit of slack because I've set my tip and then let a bit of slack out to try and absorb those liners. But you've got to make sure that when you pick that rod up, the fish is on. As you can see, first quality non-carp of the 5 metre section. Nice skimmer, great sign. Not a massive one, but very welcome. and the right species, which is obviously an important thing to talk about, because I've not, apart from that skimmer I caught early doors and one tiny one, I've not seen a skimmer all day, and that's quite often the case at this venue. He'll come late, and look at that. Even though I was on that rod quick, look at that. You'd felt that was a carp, but it's not. Even the bream can be aggressive. That was a nice skimmer. Very, very welcome. And this is like great signs, you know, we're getting indications. If you could see my rod tip now, my tip was never still, it was just little tiny touches. You can just tell that there's skimmers down there feeding. And it's important, like I say, just sit on your hands and wait for that rod to go around, because it will do. If you leave it long enough, it'll just go around, and it's the worst thing you can do is strike too soon with these fish, because you might spook them, you might foul hook them, and you just don't want that. You've got to maximise this little spell at the end, and being patient is one of your biggest edges actually. Look at that proper fish, that is a brown one. I'm giving that one bream status. And that's the difference. You just don't catch them anywhere else in the lake. You don't catch them out at 12 metres or 18 metres or whatever. They only seem to feed at the end of the match, close in. So that's why it's so important to give yourself that option of fishing close in. Of course, there was a few stripers as well kicking around out on that line as well, so they're obviously having a real good feed. I noticed that Mick actually texted me, I'm going to feed it. Now I'm actually going to feed it again. Like I've caught two nice skimmers, caught a perch. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling like the fish are eating a lot of bait, so I'm feeding it aggressively. I've seen Mick over the other side catching perch. He's texted me to let me know he's catching a few perch, and I can see Matt catching smaller skimmers. I feel like, you know, the lake's there to be won, and if we can just keep this up till the end, and we could be in business. Another nice skimmer. And this is just one of them days where everything went right. I've fished this lake, I've fished this venue many times where I've not even had a bite shot, but this was just one of them days where obviously I'd had bites all day, so it allowed me to feed my swims at the right time. There's obviously plenty of fish there. It was just one of them nice days. I wish every day was like this. Another nice fish. But yeah, it was just one of them red letter days really. And I ended the match with £23, which was just, I couldn't believe it. I genuinely couldn't believe it. If someone had offered me that at the start, I wouldn't have believed them. And as you can see, this is the last chuck of the day. I was getting liners all the time, and I ended up hooking a big carp which came off. But I ended up with £23, which is brilliant. I think I was 5th overall on the day, which it won the lake, which is brilliant. It gave obviously Will and Lee that nice little bit of weight. Will, I think from memory, had £17, so we ended up 3rd on the day, so a nice little payday as well. Just one of those lovely days where everything went right, and it was just a really enjoyable match this was. And Hallcroft, when it's good like this, it's such a good venue, interesting venue, and with those perch feeding, it added a lot of weight to people's nets, and certainly mine. I think half my weight would have been made up of them nice perch in the edge, so very nice. Hope you enjoyed that one. This carp actually came off, but I hope you enjoyed that one. A little bit different.
They're a nightmare, aren't they?
It was an important match this one, so I didn't want to actually do the talking while I was there. As you see, that carp came off, but it was by the by. The shouted the all out. £23, £17 added to Will's total. Very nice. Lake win, 5th overall, 3rd overall as pairs. I felt like I made every decision at the right time on this day.
Well done, Alan.
I was more than happy with my session on this one. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again on the next video.